Hey guys, it's Thomas here with Technovision, and welcome back to some Minecraft modding for 1.16. In this episode, we're going to be covering events, which is my personal favorite part of Forge modding, because it's where you start to get really creative with what you add to the game. And all an event is essentially a action in the game, a simple action like hitting an entity or opening up a GUI screen, just a simple action that when it occurs, runs a little bit of code that you said. That's all an event is, and we'll be covering 3 in this video, but I will show you how to find all of the other events, and hopefully you can do your own research and add some cool stuff to the game. Alright, so to get started, we want to come over to our package explorer and we want to create a new package, and we're going to name this events, of course, as you would expect. And inside of here, we're going to make all of our classes that will hold events. Now, you can organize these however you want based on, whatever you're making, but I'm just going to show one class that has all of my events in it. But just know that you can throw these in any different classes you want in any different order. It doesn't really matter as long as you have the event bus subscriber tag, which we'll talk about. So I'm going to make one class here, and I'm just going to call it mod client events, because these are going to hold all of the events that I want to fire client side. And we want to add to repository. All right, so inside of this class here, first thing we want to do is register it with the event bus. So to do that, and by the way, the event bus is essentially what manages and fires events for you. So by registering this class with the event bus, what we're doing is we're saying, make sure to run the code that's in this class when events are fired. So to do that, to register this class with the event bus, we can do @mod.event bus subscriber, and we should probably import mod first from Minecraft Forge, event bus subscriber, and then we're gonna pass in a few things in here. So I guess you could just pass in dist.client, but we're gonna actually make sure that we pass in everything just in case. I don't want to mess anything up for you, so just do mod ID is equal to your mod ID, so your main class.mod ID, tutorial, oh, that is definitely not what we want, tutorial.mod ID. Then we want to set our bus equal to I can't spell today, mod.eventBus subscriber .bus. And then you can choose between 2 here. You could choose mod if you wanted to override events that have to do with like other people's mods and stuff, but that's rarely the case, I think, for beginners. So just click Forge. That's really gonna allow you to use like Minecraft and Forge events. So leave this as Forge unless you know what you're doing. And then for value, we wanna set this equal to either client or server. You can do this with dist dot, and you can see here we have client and then dedicated server. Now, if you want your class to have events that run server side, then you're definitely going to want to have a dedicated server set here. But if you're doing client side, then you're definitely going to want to put client. I'm going to put client because, like I said here, this is mod client events, so we're going to have client events in here, but I will show you about server events in a second. So just keep that in mind, but I would just put this as .client because it's very unlikely that you're making a server-side mod, especially if you're a beginner. So inside of here, whenever you want to create a new event or utilize an event, you want to create a public static. It has to be static, very important, void, and you want to name this method just whatever. It doesn't really matter, but whatever is like relevant to your event. So the first event we're going to make is going to be, it's really silly. I planned it out earlier, but I want to make it so that when the player jumps with a stick in their hand, it sets the block under them to a Ruby block. Just like a silly event, but just something for example. And again, these are all hypothetical examples, so definitely you don't have to copy these word for word. This is just to get you comfortable with events so that you can make your own events. So what we want to do is just name this something relevant, like on jump with stick, for example. So what you want to do is pass into this an event. Now an event, there's lots of events. One way that you can actually find all the events in the game is you can come to external libraries here. You want to find Gradle Forge 1.16 mapped snapshot. And if you open this up and you just go to like nets, Minecraft Forge, then go to like event here, and then let's just open up like Anvil update event. What you can do is if you hold the control key, you can enter the event class here. And inside of here, if we do Control H, this will open up the hierarchy window. And well, this was not the best. example here. Let's go back to Anvil update event and do Control H. There we go. So if we right click on our event class here, which is the super class of Anvil update event, we can right click base on this class and you can see all of the events in the game to my knowledge. I mean, I might be wrong, but I think this is pretty much all of them. Yeah, I think that's definitely wrong. There's definitely more than this, but this is some of them. You can also find more in like the client folder and the event folder, all of that sort of stuff. But this is just a way to sort of like look at some of them, and you can see there's like block event, GUI screen event, sound event, tick event, all these things. And again, they're in these folders as well. Let me close out of here. They're in these folders like village. You can find like village events. You can find brewing events. There's like client events over here, all sorts of stuff. So definitely check out this folder if you want to find the different events. But I'm just going to show 3 for now. All right, so let's go back to our class here. Now we want to pass in our event in here. So the event I'm going to use for this one is going to be the living jump event. So living jump event, and we're just going to call this event and make some braces. Now, in order for this to actually get fired with the event bus, we need to add the @subscribe tag event, subscribe event rather. Now this tag, you have to add it to every method that you are using with events. Otherwise, the event bus subscriber will not know what to actually look at when they're firing events. So very important, always add this tag above every method that you are going to use an event in. So now that we have our tag, it's registered with the event bus, and we've got our event. We're using the living jump event, and we named it event. Now we can actually do something. So this method, this whole method here, hopefully you know Java and you know what a method is, but this method is going to run every single time this event gets fired. So every time an entity, a living entity jumps, everything in this event will be fired. So you can do whatever you want here. It's super creative, open-ended. So what I'm gonna do to sort of visualize what I had planned here, I'm gonna first get the player, and we can do that with living entity. Now a player is always a living entity, so we can do living entity player, and we can just set this equal to the player, and we can get the player by doing event dot, and you can notice here that there's a ton of stuff you can do with the event. I'm gonna do event dot get living entity, and that's gonna get the player. So now we have the actual player that jumped in this specific event here. And now what I want to do is make sure that the player is actually holding that stick that I mentioned, because we only want the ground under them to change in this event, at least for my idea to work, if they're holding a stick. So to do that, we can do if player dot, and you can get all sorts of stuff for the player. I'm going to get the held item in their main hand, and then I'm just going to get the item. And so now I have the item that the player is holding in their hand, and we want to make sure this equals items dot, and then I can just select like stick from this list here. So we're checking essentially if the player's main hand is holding a stick. If it is, then what we can do is actually set the block under them to a custom block. So one thing you can also do, by the way, and I'm going to mention this just really quickly, if you want to log like text to the console so that you can see or debug your events or see what's going on behind the scenes, come over to your main class here, and you can turn your logger that we have from previous episodes from private to public. It really should have been public to begin with. I don't know why I didn't do that, but set it to public if it's not already. And then you can call it in your event by doing your main class dot logger dot info, and this will print some info to the console. So whatever you want, I'm going to print just for testing purposes. Player tried to jump with a stick. So that's going to print to the console every time this runs, just in case you want to debug with that. So now we can actually do the action. So first we need to get the world so we can change a block in the world, and we can do that by setting a variable world, and let's just import world here. Import class. We can set world equal to like player dot get entity world, and that will get the actual world. And then to set a block in the world, we want to do world dot set block state, and then we need to pass in two things: the location of the block you want to change, and then what we want to change it to. So the location is going to be our player's location, so we can pass that in with player dot get location, or sorry, it's going to be actually get position. But if you don't have the most up-to-date mappings, and I actually think I have the most up-to-date mappings because of the newest update. This is actually going to be an unmapped function, which is, I know, super scary. It's actually going to be func_233580_cy_. This is going to be equivalent to get position or get block position. So we're going to use this, but I'm just going to add a little tag here, or a little comment rather, that is just going to let you know that if you have updated mappings, this method here is actually going to be equal to living entity get position. So yeah, for right now, this method here, get position, is unmapped, so it's func_whatever. But if you are watching this in the future from now, it will be get position. So do that instead of this weird method here, just so you know. But now that we have the player's position, we want to get the block under them. So that would be to get a block separate, like a different location from the player's location. We can do .add, and you can pass in 3 numbers here, one for X, Y, and Z. And we want X to be the same, but we want the Y value, the Y block, directly below the player. So we're just going to do -1 for that, and then 0 for Z. So all this is doing is getting essentially the player's location, but we're getting the player's location minus 1 Y value, so the block directly below them. Hopefully that makes sense, but you can use this to essentially make small movement distances from the player. And so yeah, that is going to get the player's location, or at least the block directly below the player's location. Now we want to set what we're going to change in the world. So I want to change it to our custom block. So we can do registry handler dots, and then I'm going to get my Ruby block dot get, and of course we need to get the default state because we are changing the block state here. And there we go. So this event is all done. See, it's not too scary. Essentially what's happening here is whenever a player, or rather an entity, a living entity, jumps, this is going to get fired. It's going to check if the entity has a stick. Hopefully the player does have a stick. If they do, then it's going to change the block directly under them here to our Ruby block. Not too hard. So yeah, so there you go. Now I'm going to show you a few other events, and then we're going to test all of these out at the end of the video. So the next event I want to show you is a little bit more advanced, and we're going to make a little space here. And then, by the way, at the end of this video, I will also show you how to cancel events, which is very important. So definitely wait and watch that part as well. So this next event is going to be just an idea that I'm coming up with right now. I want to make it so that that poison apple object we made, that food object, I want to make it so that if you hit a like a sheep, for example, with a poison apple, it actually poisons the entity. I think that'd be kind of cool, just for example purposes. So what we can do is we can create a public static void, and then I'm going to name this like on damage sheep. Again, it doesn't matter. And the event I'm going to pass in for this one is going to be the attack entity event. And we're going to call this event. And this is going to fire every time an entity is attacked by, you know, I think it actually attacks when like entities attack each other, but this is mainly going to be used for when like players attack an entity. And again, we do have to add that @subscribe event so that it does know that there is an event here being fired, and we can add some code here. So again, hopefully you're getting the gist of things. Anytime you want to add an event, just make a new public static method that's void, add the tag here, and then pass in the event. All right, so what I want to run here, I first want to make sure that the player is holding the poison apple when they hit the entity. So if event.getEntityLiving, that's going to get the player, .getHeld item main hand, .getItem. I want to check if this is equal to the registry handler .poisonapple.get with some brackets here. So we're making sure that the player is holding the poison apple, and if they hit the actual entity with the poison apple, then first I want to make sure that the person or the entity that they attacked is still alive, because if it's dead, we don't want the code to run. Obviously, there's going to be null pointer exceptions. So if event.getTarget, that's going to get the target, the entity that the player hit, is alive. So if the target is still alive, then let's first get the target as like an object here. So living entity and we're going to call this target is equal to, and then we can just cast to living entity the event.getTarget. And I'm doing that because getTarget gives you an entity, and we need a living entity because it is, and we've made sure that it's living here with this check, so we can actually cast it to a living entity. But if you haven't done this check here, then you definitely won't be able to cast. So now that we have the target here, we can make sure that the target is actually a sheep, because I want this to only happen to sheep, just again for example purposes. So if target is an instance of sheep entity, that's going to make sure that the target is a sheep, of course. So if that's the case, I want a few things to happen. First, I want to add a poison effect. So the way we can do that is we can do target dot add potion effect, and we can pass in a new effect instance. And this is going to take in an effect dot, and we can like pass in, for example, like effect dot poison effects dot poison, and then we can pass in like the duration. This is in ticks, so remember it's seconds times 20 because there's 20 ticks per second. So I want this to run, I want the sheep to have poison for like 10 seconds. So 10, and then always multiply it by 20 because it's in ticks. So 10 seconds times the amount of, times the tick value essentially. And then for amplifier, we can make it like poison 2 if we want, with putting 1 here. I'm not going to set an amplifier because I want it to just be poison 1. So yeah, there we go. That is going to give the sheep a poison effect. And I also, let's just see what else we can do. If we do target dot, there's a ton of stuff you can do here. You can set it on fire. That's pretty cool. You can set it on fire for a few seconds. You can set, oh my gosh, all sorts of stuff. Set sheared, you could shear the sheep, whatever you really want. But in my case, well, let's just make it glowing. That sounds kind of fun. Set glowing to true. That's gonna make the entity glow. Maybe it's like a radioactive poison or something. And so now I also wanna add, just to this event so I can show you guys, I wanna send a message to the player in chat, sort of saying that the sheep isn't feeling so well, just as like a joke, I guess. So to do that, to send messages to the player, like during events, you can actually do, well, I should mention this first. This is really hard to explain, but all events, even though this is a client event because we have dis.client, all events are going to be run on the server and the client. So actually all these events are running twice. So when it comes to sending text to the player, it's actually going to send 2 text lines to the player because this is actually running twice. Not very important, but if we want to prevent that, every time you send text to the player, you do want to make sure that it's only sending client side, at least in this case. So to do that, and again, this is every time that you're just like setting text. It's not important other times. You can check event.getPlayer.getEntityWorld.isRemote. So this is going to check if the world is remote, which checks if it's like a client or a server. And then you want to make sure, you want to check if it's false. So if it's not true, if the world is not remote, then you can send text to the player. This will again make sure that text only gets sent one time. So to send a message, we can, let's first make our message with a string here. Let's make our message red. So to make a message colored, you can do text formatting dot, and you can set like a color here. I'm gonna set red, and then I'm going to make the text say like, let's do Thanos themed. So like, that sheep isn't feeling so well. There we go. So that's the message, and then to send it to the player, we need to do player. Or well, did we even get the player? No, we didn't get the player. So we need to get the player first. Let's make a player object. I believe this event has .getPlayer. Yeah, get player entity. So we can actually do player entity this time instead of living entity. Much better. Player is equal to event.getPlayer. There we go. Oh, what's going on here? Event. Oh, I put new. Definitely should not have put that. Event.getPlayer. So that's going to get the player here, and we can send the player a message by doing player dot send message. And then to send a message, we have to also pass in a string text component. So you want to pass in a new string text component, and this is going to pass in just the message we set earlier. Just this variable here, message. And we also need to pass in the player's UUID, which is a unique ID, and we can do that with player.getUniqueID. There we go. So, oh my gosh, this event is so freaking long, but let's pass through it really quickly just to sort of really make sure that we understand what's going on here. So this event is going to be fired every time a entity is attacked. If the person who attacks the entity is holding a poison apple in their main hand, so if they're hitting it with a poison apple, it's going to first make sure that the entity, the target, is alive. If it's still alive, it's going to make sure it's a sheep, and if it's a sheep, then it's going to add a poison effect to that sheep for 10 seconds, and it's going to make the sheep glowing. Making sure that this is only done client side, it's going to send the player a message that is red and says, oh, the sheep isn't feeling so well. So yeah, there we go. All good. Now, the last event we're actually going to do before we test these out is I'm going to show you how to cancel an event. And we're going to do that with like a GUI open event. So let's come down here. Once again, new event, we're just going to make a public static void. I'm going to call this on crafting table open. And we're going to pass in the GUI open events. And just like you would expect, this is going to fire every time a GUI is opened. And again, we need that @subscribe event tag. There we go. So what I want to do is cancel this event. So what you can do by canceling an event, what you're doing is saying like every time a GUI is opened here, if you cancel it, you're making this event like you're preventing it from happening. So I guess the best way I could explain this is if you canceled a GUI open event, every GUI that you opened, like a chest or a crafting table, it would just never open because you're canceling it as soon as the event fires. You might think, well, why would you ever want to do that? Some cool things you could do with canceling is you could cancel a GUI open event if like a player opens a crafting table, and you could make it so that like players can't use crafting tables unless they like unlock an advancement, for example, or like maybe they need like a special enchantment to be able to use furnaces. All that sort of stuff is what canceling is for. So to cancel an event, first we need to make sure that the event is actually cancelable. So to do that, we want to do if event.isCancelable, because most events are not cancelable, but this one in particular is, I know for a fact. So you always want to check this, otherwise you will get errors if it's not cancelable. So now that we know that it is, we want to make sure that this is a crafting table that you're opening. So if the event.getGUI is an instance of crafting screen, I believe is the name. And you could set this to whatever you wanted, really. You could do like furnace screen, there's all sorts, but I'm gonna make sure that's a crafting screen. So if the player is opening a crafting table, then we can just cancel the event so that they literally can't open crafting tables. We could do like event.setCanceled and set this to true. That's how you cancel event, is event.setCanceled and then set it to true. I don't know why you would ever set this to false. That doesn't really make any sense to me unless you were like uncanceling the event, although I don't think that's even possible. So just set it to true, and that's pretty much it. And maybe we can like set like some info to the log, like we can get the logger here and then like send some info that says player tried to open a crafting table, what a fool, or something like that. So just for our information. All right, so this is a really simple one, but this is gonna prevent us from opening crafting tables. Again, hopefully you would want something more advanced than this, like maybe they have to like unlock certain things. I don't know. Again, it's all creative process, so you can add whatever you'd like here. But yeah, that's what this event does, and that's how you cancel events. And you can use this with any event that is cancelable, of course. Okay, so all of our events are done. Now, before we test them, I just want to mention one more thing here. So in our events package here, I'm going to make a new class, and I'm going to call this mod server events. And I'm going to put in here all of the events that are server side only. Now, it's really difficult sometimes to tell if a event is server side, and sometimes you're just going to have to do trial and error because Forge really doesn't have a good list of these. But what you can do, let's just copy this subscriber, event bus subscriber here, and paste it in so that this class is registered. But instead of dis.client, we want this to be dis.dedicated server. because this is a server events. So what you can do is you can have these two classes and you can throw all of your client events in here and you can throw all of your server events in here. And I'm just going to show you really quickly at subscribe events, public static void. So an example of like a server event, like on server chat, you could pass in server chat event is an event. I believe there's also server tick event, which I think occurs every time the server ticks, every second or so. And or I guess there's 20 ticks per second, so it would occur 20 times per second. But we could do like the server chat event, and you could put some stuff in here. I'm not going to show this because you're probably not making a server mod, but that's how you add server side events. And you would hopefully throw them all in here. But again, make sure that you have dedicated server set to the dist, the value here, because otherwise it's just not going to be a good time for you. So definitely do that. But now we are done with our events and we can run the game and test this out. All right, so we're inside of the game and I've got some items to help us test our events. Now the first thing I want to test is this crafting table here that we canceled essentially. So as you can see, if I right click on the crafting table, it actually no longer opens because we did cancel the event if you are opening a crafting table. So yeah, so now the crafting table literally just does not work anymore in the game. But you can see that like a chest GUI or like the inventory, all that stuff still works. So it's only crafting tables just like we set, which is working great. Next thing I want to try out is the stick. So you can see here that when we're jumping, nothing is happening. It's just regular Minecraft vanilla mechanics. But we did set that if you hold a stick, it would add a ruby to the ground, a ruby block. So let's try that right now. And there we go. So every time we jump with a stick in our hand, it does actually add or set the block below us to a ruby block. And we can literally just like spam ruby blocks here. And it should actually break that as well. So yeah, so this is working great. And again, if we're holding like other objects, it doesn't work. So it's only sticks, just like we set. So that's working great. Now the last event that we want to check out is the poison apple one, hitting sheep. So if you see here, if we hit a pig, for example, nothing's happening. If we hit the pig with the poison apple, nothing happens. Oh, where'd you go? Nothing happens. That's normal. We set it so that this only works on sheep, if you remember. So if we get a sheep here and we hit it with our hand, you can see nothing happens, just regular mechanics. But if we use our poison apple, there we go. It says in the chat, the sheep isn't feeling so well. It does have the poison effect. As you can see, it's taking damage and it's now glowing just like we set. And we can keep hitting it till it dies. And this will work. And you can tell here that it's just the poison apple that does this effect. So it's sort of like poisoning the sheep, I guess. But yeah, so hopefully this sort of gives you an idea of how you can make really advanced items. Like you can see the stick here now is like a way to generate ruby blocks for us. And this poison apple is now much more advanced than it was before. So get creative, check out all those events that you can find in the game and the source code, and just try out stuff to your heart's content. That's really the only way you're gonna learn. But yeah, thanks guys so much for watching this episode, and I will see you in the next episode.